commonly, it seems like animals are some of the most consistent types of characters in games. So, I decided to make a list about what animals I thought had been best represented in games. Unlike, say, green scorpions' best animals in games, though, this is a list about specific types of animals in the real world and how they have been represented in games, as opposed to animal characters. And with clarification out of the way, let's get started. Can you think of a single RPG that doesn't start you off fighting rats? I mean, they do it in Final Fantasy, they do it in Earthbound, they do it in Elder Scrolls, they do it in Fallout, they do it in Pokemon, and they do it in essentially every MMO ever, so I have to ask, why? Why are rats so commonplace in games? Well, I don't know a specific answer. I think that this has to do with the fact that rats are small, weak, and commonly found in grimy areas. While the representation itself isn't all that great, the sheer number of games that feature rats is what puts them on the list. At first, some of you may be surprised to find that fish are only at number 9 on this list, and so was I. But when you really think about it, there really aren't that many good fishing games. I mean, there are literally oceans worth of crappy fishing games, but I hesitate to say that that's good representation. And the same goes for games like Zelda, Harvest Moon, and Sonic Adventure where you can catch fish. There really isn't even that good of a Pokemon for fish. I mean, there's things like Remoraid, Feebas, and the Everloved Magikarp, but all of them evolve into something that isn't a fish, like a majestic sea serpent, a monstrous sea serpent, or a fucking octopus. In fact, the only fully evolved fish that I can think of is Luminion. And no, just no. Similarly to rats, cows aren't on here because of a particularly good representation, as opposed to the multitude of games that feature cows. First of all, the Pokemon. Yeah, I think everyone knows about Whitney's Miltank, so enough said there. Besides that, the best cows seem to be from Minecraft and the Zelda franchise. With Minecraft cows, you can kill them to get both steaks and leather. Steak is probably the best food source in the game, and leather can be used to craft armor and books. There's also the rare and incredibly strange mushrooms, which are some sort of cow-mushroom hybrid. Despite their complete bizarreness, they really aren't that useful and only give you mushrooms plus the normal 2 cow items. Pretty underwhelming if you ask me. However, the Zelda cows are the really good ones. Sure, they really only appear in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, but they are memorable there. Okay, fine, they're memorable in Majora's Mask. This is because there's a side quest in the game where alien ghosts come down from the sky and abduct the ranch's cows every year, and it's your task to keep them from getting them this time. Besides the Anju and Cafe quest, this is probably the best side quest in the game and definitely one of the most talked about, being the main reason for cows being on this list. I mean, that and the cow dimension. The less said about that, the better. Like rats, bats are very commonplace in games, but what puts bats above rats is that bats seem to be much better represented in games than rats. First, we have the keys from Zelda, which have appeared in every single Zelda game with the exception of Zelda 2 and come in fire, ice, shadow, and thunder varieties. There's even a subspecies called the Vyre that are anthropomorphic bats and are actually somewhat intelligent. And then there's the Minecraft bats, which are completely pathetic and not really worth mention. Finally, we have the Pokemon. I really don't care about the Woobat line. While some would argue otherwise, I have seen them be put to good use, so I'm not really going to fault them. But then we have the Zubat line, the big one. While so many have deep hatred for Zubat itself, which is completely warranted by the way, and little opinion on Golbat, I think most people can agree that Crobat is freaking fantastic. Seriously, its ridiculous speed and fairly decent attack make it really good in battle, and it's an excellent asset on a team. I played Black 2 fairly recently with a Crobat, and it was a standout member of my team with moves like Super Fang and Confuse Ray. It nearly didn't make my top 10 though. Hint, I'm making one of those. But yeah, I think Crobat on its own is enough to land bats at the number 7 spot on this list. You know, sheep probably wouldn't be on this list if it wasn't for Stelios. I mean, really the only list about a specific animal I've ever seen was his list about sheep. But yeah, I like sheep. First of all, there's this game called Sheep Stacker on iOS, where you stack sheep on top of each other. I've never actually played this game though. If Stelios is trustworthy about this, apparently the sheep can reach space in it. I have to say, that is some pretty crazy shit. Besides that though, there are 2 really standout sheep in games. First, we have Sheepman from Mega Man 10. All I really have to say about him is that they must have either really been running out of ideas or really struck gold with the robot masters in this game. And considering that we got some really cool robot masters in this game, like Blade Man and Strike Man, I'm willing to bet that it was the second one. And now we have the thing most people are probably expecting to be on here, the Reap line. I mean, it was number 1 on Stelios' top 5 sheep in gaming. Armageddon spoilers! But yeah, the line is absolutely fantastic. I really like how it loses its wool over the course of the line, similar to how a sheep loses its wool when it gets shaved over the course of the year. Also, another thing, why is it that sheep in games often have a connection with electricity? I mean, both Sheepman and the Reap line have electric powers, so I have to ask. My best guess would probably be because of this novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is also the book that Blade Runner is based on. Just a guess though, and no matter what, sheep are actually represented very, very well in games. Now, if I like sheep,
I like turtles.
And gaming has been pretty kind to turtles. I mean, there's this guy in Majora's Mask, Turkle, the Tortuga line, the Turtwig line, and of course the Squirrel line from the Pokemon series. And a surprisingly good amount of good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games exist. However, when you think about turtles in games, what do you immediately think of? Well, for me and most other people, the first thought would probably be the Koopa clan from the Mario series. I mean, when you really think about it, most consistent enemies in Mario appear to be turtles in some way, with notable examples being Koopa Troopas, Koopa Paratroopas, Hammer Brothers, and the Kitos. And despite being initially envisioned as an ox, Bowser and his supposed children are all turtles. Just think about that for a moment. The most famous villain in all of games is a turtle. And now you're probably wondering why turtles aren't higher on this list. Apes of different sorts are pretty consistently used in games. First of all, there's this little turd from Mario 64 that steals your hat. I freaking hate him, to put it gently. The Pokemon series seems to have a sort of obsession with apes, with the fact that there are a total of, holy crap, 13 ape Pokemon. However, by far the most famous and well-renowned apes in games are Donkey Kong and his crew. Since there's so many of them, I'm going to go over the really notable ones. First, and most obviously, we have Donkey Kong himself, the main man, or main monkey. Point is the main character of the franchise, he's pretty cool, but then again, what else should we expect from a monkey with a tie? Second, we have the main sidekick of the series, Diddy Kong. I do think that Diddy Kong's pretty cool, being a monkey with a jetpack and all, even though he doesn't really make any sense, but who cares? Finally, we have my personal favorite Kong, Cranky Kong. For those of you who don't know, Cranky Kong is actually the original Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong. That was a really repetitive sentence. In the Donkey Kong Country games, he always talks about how hard games used to be compared to those of the modern day. Personally, I think Donkey Kong Country was pretty hard as is. But yeah, I love Cranky Kong, and I'm really looking forward to Scrooge McDucking my way through levels in Tropical Freeze as him. I'm sure some people will get mad at me for clumping all of these together on one spot, but number 3 is Canines. Hey, as far as I can tell, it's better than having dogs and wolves on separate spots, and this adds foxes in to boot. First, Pokemon. Taking everything into account, there are a total of 31 canine Pokemon. And yes, the EVs are canines, I checked. Also, similarly to how sheep in games generally get associated with electricity, canines in games seem to be linked to fire a lot of the time. While I don't really have a good explanation for this one, I will say that I really do like some of the Pokemon that came out of it. As far as dogs exclusively go in games, they are generally companions to the player that assist them in combat. This is mainly represented with the dogs in Minecraft and Dogmeat from the Fallout series. Another great example is Rush from Mega Man. Rush can propel Mega Man through the water and even fly around, and it can be used as a spring to help Mega Man reach hard-to-reach areas. A really great helper if you ask me. Then, you have the wolves. While many games feature wolves, the best examples are, coincidentally, from games that are often compared, those being Amaterasu from Okami, and Wolfling from Zelda Twilight Princess. And while I won't get into which game I think is personally better, I will say that I think Amaterasu is an overall better wolf character because she acts much more like a wolf than Wolflink. I mean, I guess that makes sense because Wolflink isn't really a wolf, but hey, it's something. Either way though, as a whole, canines have been well represented in games. But then again, considering how I clumped them all together, it's a bit unfair to say that. Oh well, it's not really that important. I'm sure some people will be surprised when they find out that horses are not number 1 on this list, but that just tells me that how great horses in games are. Generally, horses are seen as just a method of transportation in games, with games like Minecraft, Elder Scrolls, and Zelda, where, besides teleporting, a horse is the quickest way to get around. However, those of you who have played Shadow of the Colossus will probably agree with me that Aggro is the best horse in all of video games. In a game where the only entities are you and 16 gigantic colossi, it's nice to have a companion of some sort and a method of transportation to get you through the large open world. Aggro does both of those things beautifully. Most obviously, riding around on Aggro to get from point A to point B is quick and it feels great. The game simply would not work without him. However, the really great thing about Aggro is the emotional impact that he has on the player. For those of you who don't know, in Shadow of the Colossus, right before the final boss, Aggro throws Wander off his back onto a platform right before falling off a cliff and supposedly dying. While Aggro turns out to be fine in the end, you really have no idea about this at the time and assume that your horse that you spent the whole game with and was incredibly useful in several different situations is dead. I will say, in my first playthrough of the game, this really hit me hard, and from what I can tell, it hit others hard too. Similarly to dogs, a horse is a great companion in games, though they are overall more useful and have been put to better use emotionally, putting them at number 2 on this list. It may sound silly at first, but number 1 on this list is chickens. Well, chickens are not really in a huge amount of games. The ones they are in have great representation. First, we have Pokemon. I don't think I really need to explain why Blaziken is fantastic, but I will anyways. Good speed with great attack and special attack make it a fantastic Pokemon. In fact, because of its speed boost ability, which makes its speed raise over the turns, it is one of the few non-legendary Pokemon to be in Uber tier. Next, while they are not exactly chickens, I think the Chocobos from Final Fantasy are really worth mention. Basically, in Final Fantasy games, Chocobos are really the first way of transportation you obtain most of the time. Because of this, they become an iconic part of the series and are one of the main reasons chickens are on this list. And also, chickens are the only animal I can think of that have an entire real game based around them. Sorry, Ubisoft Pets games, but you're a little bit too simple and not real game-like to be counted. No, the game I'm talking about is called Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. In this game, you control a dude named Billy Hatcher that wears a chicken suit and rolls around giant eggs around levels, which is obviously why the game is called what it's called. That's all I really have to say about it, because I've never actually played this game. I've heard a lot about it though, and that's freaking weird. However, if there's one chicken that is truly to be feared in games that will spark fear into the most brave of souls, they have to be the Cuckoos from the Zelda series. Sure, at first they may seem pathetic and you may even try to harm them, but when you do, you will regret it. Neutrality.